Have you ever watched someone just stop? They stop producing effort, they stop pushing forward, and they just seem to stop caring in the way they used to. Now, from the outside, it looks like a very simple choice. We see inaction, and our minds almost immediately jump to a familiar, honestly pretty judgmental conclusion. But what if we're completely misreading the underlying machinery of human behavior?
It really makes you wonder, why do we so quickly call it laziness when the actual issue might just be exhaustion? It's a question that challenges our default assumptions. When someone fails to produce output, society often slaps a label on it, a character flaw. We assume they just don't want to work, that they lack discipline or drive. But, as we're going to explore in this explainer, surface behavior can be incredibly deceiving, and our snap judgments are frequently wrong.
Think about your house for a second, specifically a weak electrical circuit. If a ceiling fan suddenly stopped spinning, you wouldn't stand there angrily flipping the switch over and over, accusing the fan of being unwilling to work. That would be absurd. You'd check the breaker. You'd investigate the power supply. The problem isn't the fan's behavior. The problem is the overloaded system supplying the power. Well, human effort operates the exact same way.
Let's strip away all the corporate buzzwords for a second. What is burnout, really? Simply put, burnout is a capacity problem. It's what happens when the internal system that produces effort gets drained significantly faster than it can recover. It is absolutely not just feeling tired after a long day at the office. It's a state of profound system depletion, and it's driven by sustained, unrelenting strain.
Laziness, on the other hand, operates on a totally different frequency. Laziness is a willingness problem. The internal engine, it's perfectly available. The fuel is in the tank, and the system is actually entirely healthy. But the person is simply choosing not to engage it. Effort isn't prioritized, purely because the individual doesn't feel it's worth their time or energy.
When we see someone stuck or clearly avoiding work, our default is to assume it's a lack of effort. But what if effort isn't the real issue at all? What if we need to pause, look past that visible symptom of doing nothing, and actually examine the hidden internal mechanisms operating right underneath the surface? Imagine you're out for a walk, carrying a backpack. At first, it feels completely fine. But then, someone keeps walking by and adding rocks to it. You can still walk, sure, but every single step costs significantly more energy. After enough rocks are added, even simple movement feels unbearably hard. You haven't suddenly become a bad walker. The load has simply changed. And that, right there, is a capacity problem.
We often forget that the hidden costs of doing things are immense. Meaningful effort uses up way more than just physical energy. It drains your attention, your emotional resilience, your patience, and even your memory for small details. Under sustained strain, all of these resources wear down. It's literally like using a dying phone while it's plugged into one of those cheap, fraying cables. The screen might flicker on for a second, but the system is severely underpowered.
By stark contrast, laziness is a willingness problem. The energy reserves absolutely exist. The battery is 100% charged, but the motivation structure is highly selective. A lazy approach simply avoids hard work unless there's a very strong immediate incentive to actually do it. It's not about a constraint on the system. It is entirely about a choice in how energy is allocated.
If you could listen in, the internal dialogue of these two states is entirely distinct. Burnout sounds like, I really want to, but I literally can't keep going. It is fundamentally about constraint and a heavy system cost. Laziness, however, sounds like, I could do that, but I don't want to engage. It is fundamentally about the allocation of perfectly available energy.
And yet, here is the grand paradox of human behavior. How do two completely different problems look exactly the same from the outside? It happens because both mechanisms result in the exact same surface behaviors: procrastinating, avoiding tasks, not starting, and seeming totally stuck. The output is identical, but the internal driver, it's completely different.
Picture two cars parked on a street. Neither of them is moving. One car is struggling to operate under a massive load, sputtering and stalling out because there's a serious problem with the power delivery system. The other car? It's in perfect condition, full tank of gas, but the driver simply refuses to press the accelerator. It's the exact same outcome, a stationary car, but there are completely different hidden mechanisms at play.
So, how do we spot the difference? Well, in real life, a distinct pattern emerges when we ask the right questions. Does the task feel exhausting before it even starts? Burnout says yes. Laziness usually says no. Does the person still care about the outcome? In burnout, often yes, they care deeply. In laziness, often much less so. Is there guilt?
Burnout makes effort feel agonizingly costly, which brings frustration and self-blame. Laziness simply makes effort feel unnecessary.
If we really listen to the inner experience of the burned-out individual, it's heavy, it's fraught. Their reality is, I want to, but my system is just depleted. They frequently experience profound dread, this thick mental fog, and intense self-blame. And why? Because they still care deeply about the work, but their internal engine simply cannot respond normally to the demands being placed on it.
Conversely, the inner experience of laziness is so much lighter. It's more like, I could, but I do not find it worth the effort. There is a stark contrast of indifference here. You'll see a strong preference for comfort, a lack of urgency, and noticeably a distinct lack of internal distress or guilt over their delays. They just aren't bothered by it.
So why does lack of action mislead us so easily? Honestly, it's because human beings are inconsistent. A burned-out person might have a brief surge of energy, again, kind of like a dying phone working perfectly for exactly 1 minute before crashing again when you open a heavy app. Outsiders see that brief flash of functionality and incorrectly assume, aha, see, they can do it if they try. But they completely miss the inevitable collapse that follows.
To really grasp this, we have to separate 3 distinct first principles. Ability, can they do it? Energy, do they have the internal fuel? And intention, do they actually want to? Burnout severs the link between intention and action. The intention is there, but the energy is completely gone. Laziness is much simpler than that. It is merely a lack of intention.
Let's apply this lens to the real world. Imagine a university student who just suddenly stops studying for their final exams. Are they just prioritizing entertainment because they don't feel like working? Or are they juggling household duties, family expectations, and a brutal commute, meaning their system is just stretched entirely too thin? You have to ask, is it laziness or is it depletion?
And this distinction, it matters enormously, because getting the fix wrong can actually be dangerous. If you mistake burnout for laziness, you apply pressure and shame. It's literally like adding overdraft fees to an empty bank account. It only worsens the drain on a system that's already completely depleted. But if you mistake laziness for burnout, you apply endless sympathy and lowered expectations, removing the very accountability that the person might actually need to get moving.
The profound paradigm shift happens when we match our response to the hidden mechanism, not just the visible symptom. Burnout requires recovery, a reduced load, and dedicated time to restore the system. Laziness, however, requires clear stakes, strong incentives, and honest ownership.
Understanding this difference kind of permanently changes how you see other people. And honestly, it changes how you see yourself. So I'll leave you with this to think about. If 2 people look equally unproductive, what would change if you stopped assuming the cause was exactly the same?